The bustling grocery store fell silent as whispers rippled through the aisles. A young man, tall and unassuming, stood in the produce section, carefully selecting apples. His familiar face, a blend of his famous parents, was unmistakable. Barron Trump. As he reached for a bunch of bananas, the murmurs grew louder. Onlookers were stunned, not just by his presence, but by the sight of him performing such a mundane task. His eyes darted around, seemingly aware of the attention, yet determined to continue shopping. Little did anyone know, this ordinary moment was about to become extraordinary. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store cast a harsh glow on the polished linoleum floors. Shoppers pushed their carts down the aisles, their eyes fixed on shelves stocked with colorful boxes and cans. It was a typical Tuesday evening until a tall figure in a baseball cap reached for a box of cereal, drawing curious glances from nearby patrons. The young man's face was partially obscured, but there was something familiar about his lanky frame. As he moved through the store, whispers began to circulate. The name Barron Trump was uttered in hushed tones, a ripple of recognition spreading through the aisles. The atmosphere shifted palpably. Curiosity mingled with judgment as people abandoned their shopping lists to observe this unexpected celebrity sighting. Some pulled out their phones, surreptitiously trying to capture a photo. Others openly stared, their carts forgotten as they watched Barron select items with careful consideration. Dr. Emily Walters, a psychologist specializing in the effects of fame on adolescents, explains the public's fascination with such moments. There's a cognitive dissonance that occurs when we see public figures performing everyday tasks. We've created a narrative about their lives, and anything that contradicts that narrative becomes instantly captivating. Barron's movements were deliberate and focused as he navigated the aisles, occasionally consulting a list on his phone. His shoulders were slightly hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller despite his towering height. His eyes darted around, never lingering too long on any one person or product. As Barron reached for a carton of milk, a middle-aged woman nearby couldn't contain herself. "I can't believe he does his own shopping," she stage whispered to her companion. "Shouldn't he have people for that?" Her friend nodded, adding loudly, "Must be slumming it for a photo op." The comments were clearly audible in the now hushed store. A few people shifted uncomfortably while others nodded in agreement. The tension in the air was palpable, a mix of curiosity, judgment, and anticipation. As Barron made his way to the checkout line, the whispers grew louder. The cashier, a young woman with vibrant blue hair, greeted him with a warm smile. "Found everything okay?" she asked, her tone friendly and devoid of judgment. Barron nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, thank you," he replied softly. As the cashier began scanning the items, something caught the eye of those closest to the checkout. Among the groceries were several large packages of diapers, baby formula, and non-perishable food items. The whispers took on a new tone, confusion replacing judgment. As whispers rippled through the produce section, a woman with streaks of gray in her auburn hair nudged her friend. "Is that Barron Trump?" she hissed, eyes wide. Her friend gasped, "Here!" It can't be. The store buzzed with hushed conversations and furtive glances. Shoppers abandoned their carts, forming clusters at the ends of aisles. Some pretended to examine fruit while stealing looks at the tall figure, methodically making his way through the store. "What's he doing here?" a man in a business suit muttered. "Doesn't he have staff for this?" A teenager snickered. "Maybe he's slumming it now." Laughter spread through the growing crowd. Dr. Sarah Hines, a social psychologist specializing in celebrity culture, explains, "Encountering public figures in everyday settings challenges our perceptions. We've constructed a narrative about their lives, often based on media portrayals, and seeing them perform mundane tasks doesn't fit that story. This cognitive dissonance can lead to fascination or mockery. Social media has significantly shaped these perceptions. A Pew Research Center study found that 62% of adults get news from social platforms, where celebrity content often trends. This constant exposure to curated glimpses of public figures' lives creates unrealistic expectations. As the murmurs grew louder, Barron's shoulders tensed. He paused, hand hovering over some bananas, before taking a deep breath and continuing. His face remained impassive, but his movements became more deliberate, each item carefully selected and placed in the cart. Dr. Emily Chen, a clinical psychologist specializing in adolescent development, offers insight. Being the subject of public judgment can be incredibly stressful, especially for a young person. It can lead to increased anxiety, self-doubt, and social withdrawal. Maintaining composure in these moments often comes at a significant emotional cost. The spectacle continued to grow. A woman with a toddler approached, phone held aloft for a photo. College students debated whether to ask for a selfie. The air crackled with tension, a mix of curiosity, judgment, and anticipation. Just as the situation threatened to boil over, an elderly man with a cane shuffled forward. The crowd parted, expecting confrontation. Instead, he stopped a respectful distance from Barron and spoke in a voice weathered by age but firm with conviction. "Young man," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I don't know you, but I know what it's like to be judged unfairly. You carry yourself with dignity. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed for doing honest work." A hush fell over the onlookers. Barron turned, meeting the old man's gaze. For a moment, they stood in silent understanding. Then, with a slight nod, Barron resumed shopping, his movements now infused with quiet confidence. The crowd began to disperse, conversations turning from mockery to reflection. Some looked ashamed, avoiding eye contacts. They hurried back to their own tasks. The tension in the grocery store was palpable as a middle-aged man emerged from the crowd, his face etched with disdain. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, emphasizing the man's confrontational posture as he approached Barron. The air grew thick with anticipation, the soft hum of refrigerators providing an eerie backdrop. "Well, well," the man drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "If it isn't the little Trump prince, slumming it with us commoners. What's the matter, boy? Daddy's allowance not enough to hire someone to do your shopping?" The store fell silent, all eyes turning to Barron. The weight of expectation pressed down on his shoulders, a familiar burden he'd carried for years. As the seconds ticked by, Barron's jaw tightened slightly, his internal struggle visible only to the keenest observers. Dr. Amelia Foster, a renowned psychologist specializing in the effects of public scrutiny on young individuals, explains the complexity of such situations. Children of high-profile figures often find themselves in a no-win situation, she states. If they react defensively, they're seen as entitled. If they don't react at all, they're perceived as aloof or arrogant. The constant pressure to maintain a certain image can be incredibly damaging to their sense of self and personal growth. Then, something unexpected happened. Barron's posture relaxed, and a small smile touched his lips. He turned to face his accuser, his voice calm and steady. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but I believe everyone, regardless of their background, should know the value of work and the importance of understanding the everyday experiences of others. I'm here because I want to be, not because I have to be." The man's smirk faltered, clearly caught off guard by the measured response. Barron continued, his words carrying a wisdom beyond his years. "If you'd like, I'd be happy to explain why I chose each item in my cart. Some are for me, yes, but many are for those who need them more than I do. Would you care to join me in selecting items for the local shelter?" A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The man who had been so confident in his mockery now stood speechless, his face a mixture of confusion and shame. Barron's invitation hung in the air, a bridge extended across a chasm of misunderstanding. As Barron's words sank in, a shift occurred in the atmosphere of the store. The tension dissipated, replaced by a sense of collective introspection. People who had been quick to judge now found themselves questioning their assumptions. The man who had confronted Barron stood silent for a moment longer, before muttering an apology and quickly walking away, leaving behind a store full of people forever changed by an unexpected encounter. The atmosphere in the store shifted dramatically, like a sudden change in the weather. The air, once thick with judgment, now crackled with shame and admiration. Barron's unexpected response had sent ripples through the crowd, leaving a stunned silence. Shoppers grappled with conflicting emotions, their preconceptions shattered by the young man's grace under pressure. As the shock subsided, tension settled over the aisles. Onlookers exchanged glances, reflecting complex emotions. Some seemed embarrassed, while others reassessed their opinions. The cognitive dissonance was evident as they struggled to reconcile their notions with reality. Dr. Amanda Reeves, a social psychologist, explained, "When we encounter information that contradicts our beliefs, it creates mental discomfort. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole." The shoppers were forced to confront their assumptions about privilege and character. The impact rippled through different age groups uniquely. Teenagers stood in thoughtful silence, phones lowered. An elderly couple wore expressions of grudging respect. A middle-aged woman wiped away a tear, visibly moved. Curiosity began to build. "What's he really doing here?" one shopper murmured. "There must be more to this story," replied another. The air of mockery had been replaced by genuine interest. Dr. Michael Chen, an expert in media studies, offered his analysis. Humanizing moments like these can profoundly impact how public figures are perceived. They bridge the gap between the pedestal we place celebrities on and our own experiences. As Barron approached the checkout, the atmosphere continued to evolve. The earlier hostility had dissipated, replaced by anticipation. Even vocal critics now watched with interest, judgments suspended. People noticed the unusual assortment in Barron's cart: bulk packages of non-perishables, toiletries, and other essentials. This sparked new speculation, tinged with growing respect and curiosity. A young cashier, eyes wide with recognition, greeted Barron. The interaction that followed would soon reveal the true purpose behind his presence, transforming this ordinary grocery run into something extraordinary. As Barron's items rolled down the conveyor belt, the cashier's eyebrows raised in surprise. The collection before her was unlike anything she'd seen before, especially from someone of Barron's background. Large packages of diapers nestled against bulk containers of non-perishable foods. Toiletries and hygiene products filled the spaces between, creating a mosaic of essentials that spoke of urgent need. The young cashier, her earlier warmth now tinged with curiosity, couldn't help but ask, "Planning for the apocalypse?" Her attempt at humor fell flat as Barron's eyes met hers, a depth of purpose evident in his gaze. "Not quite," Barron replied, his voice soft but clear. "These are for people who need them more than I do." The cashier's hands stilled on the scanner, her eyes widening with understanding. In that moment, the assumptions about wealth and charitable giving that permeated society seemed to crystallize in the fluorescent-lit space between them. As Barron continued to explain his shopping mission, his words carried throughout the store. The earlier mockery and judgment faded, replaced by a hushed attention. He spoke of the local homeless shelter, of the families struggling to make ends meet, of the babies who needed diapers, and the elderly who needed nutritious meals. "I've been fortunate in my life," Barron said, his voice gaining strength. "But with that fortune comes a responsibility to help others. It's not about recognition or praise. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching." Dr. Michael Chen, an expert in media studies and public image, later analyzed the impact of Barron's actions. What we saw was more than just a charitable act. It was a moment that humanized someone who had been largely seen as a distant figure. It challenged the narrative about wealth, privilege, and compassion. As word of Barron's true purpose spread through the store, a palpable shift occurred. The teenagers who had been snickering earlier now stood in thoughtful silence. An elderly couple, who had initially frowned at the commotion, now wore expressions of grudging respect. A middle-aged woman wiped away a tear, moved by the unexpected turn of events. The revelation of Barron's shopping mission did more than just silence his critics. It sparked conversations about assumptions, judgment, and the nature of privilege. As the last items were scanned and bagged, the atmosphere in the store had transformed from one of judgment and whispers to a mix of shame and admiration. As the truth about Barron's intentions rippled through the store, the atmosphere underwent a palpable shift. The once judgmental whispers transformed into a collective gasp of realization. A woman who had earlier criticized Barron now approached him, her eyes brimming with tears. I'm so sorry. I judged you without knowing the whole story," she stammered, her voice quivering with emotion. The scene unfolding in the grocery store was a microcosm of human emotion and social dynamics. Those who had been quick to mock now grappled with guilt, admiration, and self-reflection. The cognitive dissonance was evident on their faces. the struggle between their preconceived notions and the reality before them. Dr. Rachel Simmons, a social psychologist specializing in group behavior, explains this phenomenon. When confronted with evidence that contradicts our initial judgments, we experience a form of emotional whiplash. This can lead to profound moments of self-reflection and personal growth. As the truth spread, a remarkable transformation began to take place. An elderly man shuffled forward, placing a can of soup in Barron's cart. "It's not much," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "but I want to help." This simple act sparked a wave of compassion. A young couple added diapers to the growing pile, while a group of teenagers pooled their money to buy formula. The very people who had sneered at Barron were now standing in line to contribute. Dr. Emily Lawson, an expert in community psychology, notes the contagious nature of such acts. Kindness has a ripple effect. When people witness genuine altruism, it often inspires them to act similarly. This can create a positive feedback loop that can transform entire communities. The store manager approached Barron, offering a generous discount on all donated items. "You've reminded us of what really matters," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As customers left the store, many were already sharing the story on social media. Within hours, Barron's cause was trending, with people across the country pledging to donate to their local shelters. Local news vans arrived, drawn by the social media buzz. As reporters set up their equipment, the magnitude of what had transpired began to sink in. What had started as a simple grocery run had transformed into a catalyst for community action. In the days that followed, shelters across Cleveland reported a surge in donations. The ripple effect continued to spread, with other cities launching their own initiatives. Barron's act of kindness had struck a chord that resonated far beyond the confines of that grocery store, reminding everyone of the power of compassion and the impact of leading by example. As the truth about Barron's act of kindness spread across social media, Barron's Care became a trending topic within hours, igniting reactions ranging from skepticism to overwhelming support. The grocery store incident transformed from a local curiosity into a national talking point. Social media platforms exploded with activity. Twitter erupted with tweets, Facebook groups buzzed with discussions, and Instagram stories shared snapshots of Barron's shopping cart. The rapid spread of information painted a vivid picture of how modern narratives are shaped in the digital age. The story sparked a heated debate about public perception and social media's role in crafting narratives around public figures. Dr. Rachel Thompson, a media studies expert, observed, "We're seeing the double-edged sword of viral content. It allows for rapid dissemination of positive stories while also amplifying misinformation and knee-jerk reactions." The online discourse swung wildly between poles. Skeptics questioned the authenticity of the act, citing past controversies surrounding the Trump family. Others hailed Barron as a beacon of hope, praising his humility and compassion. This dichotomy highlighted the deeply polarized nature of public opinion. Celebrities and influencers amplified the reach of #Barron's Care. A pop star tweeted, "This is what real privilege looks like, using your position to help others." Lars inspired, garnering millions of likes and retweets. The Trump family's response added another layer to the narrative. While Barron remained silent, his older siblings shared messages of support. Donald Trump Jr. tweeted, "Proud of my little brother, he's always had a big heart." Dr. Samantha Reeves, a sociologist specializing in public figures, provided insight into the potential long-term effects on Barron's public image. This act of kindness has the power to redefine how he's perceived, separate from his family's controversial legacy, she explained. It could mark the beginning of Barron carving out his own identity in the public eye. As the story unfolded, it sparked a nationwide conversation about empathy and judgment. Schools incorporated discussions about the incident into their curricula, and community organizations reported an uptick in volunteer signups, with many citing Barron's actions as their inspiration. The impact of Barron's grocery store odyssey extended far beyond the initial act. It became a catalyst for reflection, challenging people to examine their own biases and preconceptions. In a world often divided, this simple act of generosity served as a powerful reminder of our shared humanity, inspiring tangible actions and fostering a renewed sense of community engagement across the nation. The grocery store incident's impact lingered long after the headlines faded. Community organizations reported a surge in volunteer signups, with many citing Barron's actions as their motivation. The event challenged perceptions of public figures, prompting discussions about privilege and responsibility. Dr. Emily Lawson, a community psychologist, noted, "This reminds us that kindness has a ripple effect." The hashtag #Barron's Care continued to trend, sparking conversations about the power of small gestures to create meaningful change. Barron's continued commitment to community service was evident in his ongoing involvement. His actions inspired people to look beyond surface-level judgments and seek understanding in daily interactions. As we reflect on this unexpected lesson, we must ask ourselves, how can we carry this spirit of compassion into our own communities?